On today's episode, we will tackle the coaching side of Major League Baseball. Former player and current New York Mets pitching coach Jeremy Hefner joins us next on Beat the Shift. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Off season for us. We're about to get started with our fantasy baseball coverage of the year. Just a couple of months to spring training. Can't wait. Hope the lockout gets decidedly ended pretty soon, and we get back to seeing games. And we've got a very special guest tonight. He is the pitching coach of the New York Mets. He actually played for the Mets as well in the 2012 and 2013 season, winning 15 games for them. Very special welcome to the Beat the Shift podcast to Jeremy Hefner. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure. Thanks for coming on. And, before we start the show, can you tell us what has been the highlight of your professional career thus far, either as a player or as a coach?
Oh, man. Wow. It's a deep question. Probably I'll reference Trevor on the previous podcast. Like, making it to the big leagues was definitely a career highlight for me. I mean, that's every kid's dream, is to pitch in the big leagues. And I was fortunate to get that opportunity, and that was definitely the highlight of my playing career. I think coaching, getting to interact with some of the guys that I get to interact with, and the best to ever do it, and to get to learn from them as much as I'm trying to teach them. I get to learn from those guys day in and day out. So it's a career highlight every day for me.
Right. No, it's fantastic. And now that you're the pitching coach for the Mets, we're talking a lot about preparation and how you prepare players for the game. How do you prepare pitchers in terms of both the physical and the mental aspects of the game?
Sure. So it's not just me that's preparing these guys. Ultimately, it starts with them and their want to, and like kind of how their mind works, how they tick, how their engine runs, what type of information they want, what type of information that they may find useful that they're not using yet. Like, how can we get that information in front of them, whether it be from our analytics people or from another coach or another player. And that's in terms of game planning. Like, it kind of comes from that wing of our group, whether it's me talking through a heat map, or talking through a statistic, or a pitch quality, or whether it's some of our analytics people or our advanced scouting people talking through a lineup, and where they may go into the game, if we're talking about a reliever or if it's a starter, how we're going to navigate the middle part of their lineup in a higher leverage situation earlier in the game, those types of things. And then from a physical preparation standpoint, like, we have a great performance staff, from our physical therapists to our trainers to our strength conditioning to our dietitians to our cooks. We try to take a holistic approach with the Mets, and try to use all the resources available to us from every arena, and to set these guys up for success day in and day out.
So I asked Trevor May this on our past episode, but in terms of preparation, would you say that it's more about having the players execute their own strengths, or would you say it's more about studying the opposing team and making them pay for their weaknesses during a game?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's the age-old question. Like, this is the question that's been in baseball forever. Ever since guys started to think about themselves as having strengths, and the hitters as having weaknesses, this is the question. And I love this question. This is the chess match of our game. What pitch am I going to throw? Is it going to be my number one pitch, or is it going to be my number four pitch? Or is, you're terrible against sliders, so am I just going to feed you sliders the entire time? Well, the hitter knows that I'm probably going to throw sliders the entire time. So can he adjust even though he's not good at hitting the slider? Like all these types of little nuanced, the nuanced part of our game is what I love. And so I think it depends, is probably the best answer that I can give you. And I think it depends on, I think there's a talent component to this, and how good is the pitcher versus how good is the hitter, and then you kind of build a decision tree off of that. And if I'm better than the hitter, then I'm going to just stick to my strengths. If we're kind of on the same playing field, then I'm gonna kind of mix and match depending. Then it would be count dependent, right? If I'm ahead in the count, then I'm going to stick to my strengths. If I'm behind, maybe I need to go more towards their weakness. Or if I'm like myself, as a major league player, where I was kind of an up and down guy, and I kind of had to navigate this confrontation differently. Maybe I went slowly to the hitter's weaknesses because I was more of a command guy, more of a control guy, and I could do that. So that actually was a strength of mine, was to go after their weaknesses. So there's different ways to look at this, and so I think ultimately, what is the guy comfortable with on that night? What are we working on in between his outings? If it's a starter, if it's a reliever, quality, he doesn't get as much time on the mound in between outings. But how are we thinking about his pitches? Are we messing with a grip? How's he feeling? Is he what can he execute in and out of the zone depending on the count? Like there's just so many different avenues we could go with that question. And that's why I love our game, because every night's different. And you just never know. So it's great.
What would a typical game plan consist of? Would it consist of how many times would the order a starter will go? Would it consist of you don't want a certain batter in the lineup to beat you a certain night or something like that?
Yeah, sure. Now you're talking more like game theory, game management, not necessarily like how you're attacking a hitter. I think the third time through the order, obviously it's real, like it's backed up by the math, and it is a real thing. So then I think it's my job as pitching coach to try to find a way to lessen the effect, or find a way to navigate that third time if we need that guy to pitch deeper into the game, whether a bullpen shot or it's a blowout one way or the other, and we need our starter to go. And so I think there's things that we talk about before the game that you have some like general guidelines or a foundation you want to work off of. No different than a chess or any type of game, basketball or football. Like there's always a plan going into the game. Now the game can sometimes present itself differently, where you may have to deviate from the original plan. But I think as long as your process is sound, and as long as you're making sound decisions based on some pretty good data or strong experience, then I think it's good it's fine to deviate from the plan. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we do it. Obviously, we don't have a manager at this moment in time. I'm the only person on our staff right now. So, and this all depends on who all's on our staff and how we're going to operate. But that's kind of how we've operated over the last 2 years. And from a pitching run prevention point of view, like that's probably how we'll continue to operate, because that's how most of our industry's operating.
During the whole offseason, one of the game plans that a lot of the teams implemented was using an opener. Have the Mets ever, as a philosophy, ever considered using an opener, or is that just based on the manager, or is that based on the team philosophy?
Yeah, we used an opener a couple of times this year. I can't remember if we used it too much in 20, but in 21, Miguel Castro opened a couple of times. Aaron Loop opened a couple of times. I think Tommy Hunter actually opened against Atlanta. So so we deployed that. I think we had 38 pitchers this year. So we were kind of doing everything we could to prevent runs, and opener's been proven to work, and so we deployed that a few times.
Yeah, and Tommy Hunter was on pace for a shutout or a perfect game, actually, if you project it out for a full 9 innings, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
I remember that game. Want to talk about the bullpen, and as the pitching coach, do you have a say in who that night is going to be first in from the pen and who's next in from that pen, or is that something that's totally manager related and that you have to prepare for?
Yeah, I think it's tough to answer that question like right now, like moving forward into the future,
Right.
because we don't know who our manager is. But yeah, kind of how it operated in the past is we would have that was all part of our plan going into the game. Like, we wanted one of our a particular bullpen piece to face this part of the order and a particular piece to face this part of the order, because that pitcher's strengths matched up best, or they were just better, which is quite often the case, and often the case with some of our guys, because they're good. And so, and with that, like, I think there's this I don't know what the right word is, like connotation of like there's unbelief then with some of our pitchers, and like that's not the case. I think for me, I try to look at it as we're setting our guys up for success. And so if we get them into the game in a particular spot, like we are setting them up for success. And everyone's on a different career arc. Every player is on a different career arc, and some guys need to gain experience in lower leverage situations so they can become that high leverage weapon. And likewise, like some guys used to be in that high leverage position, and now they're at their point in their career where maybe they're a little bit more in the medium leverage, and they're doing many more things outside of pitching, but they're helping the younger players know what it's like to pitch in high leverage, and helping me coach, and a lot of the things that you don't see in the box score that maybe some older players are doing. So yeah, I think it's all part of the plan, and it depends on. There's a lot of things that go into that, like if the guy's throwing on a back-to-back night or a back-to-back to back, what's his workload been over the last week? When's our next off day? Is there rain in the forecast? Like all these things you try to consider while taking into account the health and well-being of the player, while also winning the baseball game, which is very important.
Speaking of health, the staff is getting a little bit on the older side. How do you plan on keeping the pitchers healthy throughout the entire course of the season?
Yeah, I think it comes down to communication, and communication between all the parties that support our players, and then the players communicating with us what they need and how they're feeling, and then we can tell them what we see. They tell us how they're feeling. Then we get to a point where we're setting them up for success. We're not overworking guys, but we're also using our weapons in a way that leads to the most wins possible, while sustaining, because they're not good if they're on the IL, right? Like they're not helping us win, and so we have to make sure that we're like towing that line between overuse and using them properly. And that comes down to communication. That's the player taking care of themselves on and off the field, and that's support staff doing everything in our power to make sure that they're healthy, taken care of, supported, communicated with, all those things.
Now, one thing that may happen is that some pitchers may come to you and say they need an extra day off, or a pitcher may come to you and say, I don't want an extra day off. I want to keep pitching. Do you find that some pitchers benefit from extended rest? Some pitchers don't benefit from the extended rest?
Yeah, that's tough. It's tough to like quantify this, or at least in my experience, it's been tough to quantify it. Like the whole, if I give this guy 2 days off, like he pitches better. Like I just haven't found that to be true. And likewise, I do think that if a guy pitches back to back, like there's definitely, you can prove this in the data that there's a bit of a drop off in stuff, whether it's lack of swing and miss, lack of strike throwing ability, whether that leads to more walks or you're in disadvantage counts or whatever in the back-to-back situation. So, I tend to think like if we could have guys throw multiple innings on a given night and then have them rest for a 1 or 2 day period and then throw multiple innings again, probably going to get the best out of that guy. Now it depends, right? But just generally speaking, but there are some guys who, the old rubber arm, right? They can go out there and they can throw it, 15 to 25 pitches and then get out of a jam, and then the next night they're right back up there, and they actually work better when they're used more. And it just depends, right? That's the communication piece, and that's the getting to know your players and trying to figure out if they're competitive. Because I played this game, like, you want to be out there, like, even when you're sore, or maybe you're operating at like 85% of your normal capabilities, like, you want to be out there and you want to help your team win. And so trying to, and then that's our job as a staff, is to make sure that we're still, even if they're at like 85%, should they be in the game right now? Yes or no? And then being okay with the outcome.
Yeah, and I guess that's where, you come into very close contact with the players to really get their vibe and their pulse, and to make sure that you have the right formula to win. But of course, you're developing the players, and of course, you're going with your best, despite if they're not 100% on the given day. And this is the Fangraphs podcast, so we do have to talk a bit about analytics here. Just generally, do you consider yourself to be an analytics heavy pitching coach?
Did you say savvy?
I said analytics heavy, but
heavy.
We'll throw in savvy also.
Savvy.
We'll throw that in too.
I would say that I'm a user of information. I think analytics gets a bad rap, and I think it can push people away at times, and I just don't think that's helpful. And it's not like, I know what analytics means, but for some guys, like, analytics is a bad thing, because for whatever reason. And so I think I use information, and first I try to have a subjective view of whatever I'm thinking about, right? Whether it's pitching mechanics or a pitch type, or how we should pitch a particular batter. So I try to have a subjective view of that, which has been done for 100 plus years or whatever in baseball. Then we have all this information now that gives us an objective view. And then I try to see what the difference is, or if there is a difference between my subjective view and the objective view. And if there is a difference, then we have to make a decision, which way do we go? And then furthermore, like, in terms of learning and growing and trying to understand and trying to be the best that I can be for our players and for my organization, like, what can I learn from that difference? And is it just my bias, or is it something that I'm just wrong about, or is it just a small sampling? Is it a small sampling issue where like, the data isn't, there's no correlation. So, like, we just gotta, with certain things, like, it's okay to go towards the subjective view. Not a lot. So in that regard, like, I think it's tough because the game is played every day and it's very nuanced, but there's so much data and you play so many games that, yes, if I throw my slider 80% of the time, like, I'm going to be a 40% strikeout guy over the course of 162 games. But tonight against Ronald Acuna, I don't feel good with my slider. Like, it's not coming out of my hand well. It's raining or whatever. Like, I got to throw my fastball 80% of the time. And like, maybe I don't get the punch out. Like, it's tough, right? Like, it's all these things, all these little questions that you can't have an objective view because there's not enough data to back it up. That's where I that's where the game is right now on a coach level for me. I have the macro, like I have the big picture, and I know what to do on the big picture, but on the micro, on the lowest level, on the pitch level, like it's raining, I can't hold the slider. What do I do? Like that's the question, right? It's not so much like what's my best pitch. Like clearly, the slider's my best pitch. Just say I'm a generic slide. I'm a slider heavy guy, and I need to be 70-80% slider. Like yes, if I do that over 162 games, like I'm gonna be dominant. I'm gonna be a 40% strikeout guy. But yeah, I'm rambling a little bit on a tangent, but like I would say that like I try to use the information to find my holes, find my biases, and uproot those, and try to be the best that I can be for our players. That's probably the simplest way to answer that question.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on a good point about the use of analytics and gut, against it. I mean, I'm an analytics guy. I'm an actuary. I do models and statistics all day long, and obviously I do the work for Fangraphs, and I do projections for Fangraphs, and, I have listeners asking me all the time, when do you follow projections and when do you go with your gut? And my answer I always give is, I take the projections and I take the objective analytics view unless I know information to the contrary in a certain situation. And, you mentioned, hey, it's raining. I don't feel so good. Maybe I shouldn't pitch to Acuna. I mean, that is where you have to supersede the information that you get. Analytics tells you the long-term average. This is what you should do in the long term. But, of course, you know what it is on a night-to-night. And it's funny, I remember a couple of years ago in the World Series where you had Blake Snell pitching for the Rays, and he was just going great. And if that year Blake Snell didn't pitch a third time through the order, I think 5 innings was his maximum for the year. And everyone complained, oh, my goodness, why you're not leaving Blake Snell in? Oh, my God, why are you taking him out? You shouldn't be doing that. And my answer to that is, it worked for the Rays for 162 games that the game plan was Snell goes for 5 innings, and that's it. It got him to the World Series. Why would you not differ from that point? Can you see that kind of case where you would say, well, you go with the analytics because that's what it says in a long term, and deny the gut that says, but it's the World Series, you got to go for it, and who cares what the analytics says, we got to go with the guy. Like, where do you divide the line with that? I think it's an interesting thing, and curious to hear about what you thought of the Snell situation and similar situations.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a tough one. Because I wasn't there. Like, it's so easy to armchair quarterback this thing, and
yeah, but it's really the root, and it's really the root of here's what the analytics say, and when do you veer off it? And I would think that that's something really at the heart of what you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. For sure, and you got to make tough decisions, right? Well, I don't necessarily. The manager does, but like I'm a part of the staff that makes decisions, like how are we going to plan out this game, or how are we going to try to win this game today? And I have to assume, like, I don't know Kevin, and I don't know their process in Tampa, but it seems pretty sound, and they probably have a plan, and the plan was probably to do what they did, and they stuck with their process and what they kind of laid out for the entire season. So it's really being a process-driven guy. It makes a lot of sense why they took him out. But from a fan and from just watching the game and rooting for the human, for Blake, and for like what he could do in that situation, the World Series, and like it was tough for me to watch him take him out, right? So like it's a I think from a player's view and from a fan's view, I was sad that they took him out. But
Right.
From being a process-oriented guy, like it makes all the sense in the world. And I think if I was in that position and I had set up some sort of process and we were going to ride this process out for the entire season, then it makes sense.
Right. No, absolutely. And I'm not sure how much you can answer this question. Divulge any information. Of course, don't divulge what you can't. But what are the 2 or 3 important stats that you might look at in analytics, or maybe what are the important visual video aids that you might drill down to help pitchers, get the best out of them?
Yeah, I think it's identifying what guys do well, and sometimes they don't even know that what they do. They don't even know that they do something particularly well, and so you have to illuminate that. You have to bring light to that and help them understand why they have this potential of a whatever elite pitch where they could throw it 60-70% of the time, and it's swing and miss pitch, and they can turn themselves into, from a contact oriented pitcher to a swing and miss type pitcher. Or they're or it's location based, or there's lots of different ways to go. But I tend to look at first, I look at 2 different things. I look hand to glove. So we're talking ball flight, where the pitch is landing, location, movement, horizontal, vertical movement, velocities, those types of things. And then I look biomechanically. So first movement to release, how they're moving, or what's their intent? Like, do they look like they want to try to throw hard, or are they trying to command the ball? Is there room for velocity gain? And that's without even knowing like pitch scripts and knowing the human and how he learns, and those types of things. So I'm looking in the margins, right? You're trying to find guys who trying to find something in each guy that you can just get just a little bit better, over the course of 162 games, or if it's 32 starts for a starter and it's 65-70 games for a reliever, and you just marginally make their stuff better across the board, then but you didn't really do a whole lot to the athlete. You just kind of helped everything, whether it be location based or added horizontal movement, added vertical movement, positive or negative, and added velocity. You do all these things, and then maybe you turn a guy that's slightly above replacement level into a guy that's lined up to be a millionaire, a multimillionaire over the course of his career.
All right, time to have a little fun here. It's time for the Injury Guru's Trivia of the Week.
Well, since the World Series is still kind of fresh in our minds, I wanted to ask this question to you, Jeremy, because I think one of these names may have some importance to you. Since the DH era began, who are the only 2 pitchers to hit a home run in the World Series? Would you know that?
Oh, man.
Wow.
Hit a home run in the World Series?
That's the toughest question you've ever asked, by the way, Ruvain.
Well, if you watch the World Series, they did mention it, so.
I did watch the World Series, but sometimes I turn the volume down. I'm going to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know.
The first answer is Ken Holtzman for Oakland in 1974. The other is Joe Blanton for the Phillies in 2008.
Who was that?
Now, why is Joe Blanton important? Anything in particular? Did you think of anything in particular?
Yeah, Joe. I hate bringing this up, but I hit a home run off Joe in the big leagues.
and wasn't that also your first big league win as well?
Correct.
So in your first big league win, you hit a home run off of Joe Blanton, who actually, during the course of the game, you actually also gave up a home run to future Mets AAA catcher Brian Schneider. And the Mets hit 2 home runs that game. You hit one, and Jerry Harrison Jr. hit one, pinch hitting for you, which was actually a kind of an oddity.
Wow.
And also, that game took a very tidy 2 hours and 33 minutes, which is a very interesting thing.
The good old days.
Speaking of speaking of the DH era,
How in the world
would
do
you
you
be
get to
happy
that?
if
That was a pretty I'm pretty impressed, Ruben, that you really drilled into that one for Jeremy. Wow.
Well,
Awesome.
listen, I don't know if Jeremy knows, but we are both lifelong Met fans, so we've seen everything, and I probably remember that, but it's so long ago. Not to say you're old, but it's so long ago. Would you be happy if the DH became universal?
Whew, another tough one. Again, I think it kind of goes back to the Blake scenario. I think from a player's view, and from a fan's view of the national, I'm a National League guy. Like I was drafted by San Diego. I played for the Mets. I finished my career in AAA for the Cardinals. So like I only know National League. Um, I grew up in Oklahoma. I still live in Oklahoma. Like Cardinals were right here. Um, I'm in Cardinals Nation. We obviously have the Royals that are close and the Rangers that are close as well. But like I'm a National League guy. So from that view, I don't want the universal DH. If you're asking the coach, I do want the universal DH. I think the injury risk component um, is just I just don't want my guys getting hurt hitting. And I have some really good guys that can swing the bat. They're athletes. You know, we did a really good job the last 2 years here. For the most part, getting our bunts down, but putting bat to ball and creating some runs. And so, yeah, it's a tough one, and I'm kind of riding the fence a little bit on it. But I think for me, and where I'm at right now, you know, if I wasn't coaching and I was just a fan, I would still want the pitchers to hit. I would want to keep the in it because it changes the way you manage a game. Like it puts so much. It's different. It's a different game than the DH game. And so yeah, I'm gonna ride the fence on it.
Spoken as a true NL fan,
And
of course.
and speaking of other rule changes, are you for or against the three batter rule, the extra inning runner starting at second? I mean, this must change your game planning when it comes to being a pitching coach and knowing who to use and to when.
Yeah. So I've actually enjoyed the three batter minimum because it's forced all of our guys to pitch better, right? Like there's not just left only guys anymore. Like you got to come in and you got to face a righty. You're going to have to face a righty. Just the way they construct lineups now. There's never three lefties in a row. So that would be a good trivia question. Like when's the last time there were three lefties in a row? Not switch hitters, like true lefties. So I think it's forced guys to pitch better. And I don't think it changes too much of the strategy of the game or those types of things. As far as the extra inning rule, like I don't know, like it certainly makes you don't have any 19 inning games and stuff like that, and completely burning the bullpen from that perspective, I like it, but I don't know, I don't like giving up runs, and so like there's a guy at second base to start the inning, like I don't know, it's again, I'm going to ride the fence. I don't know. Like ultimately, it's way out of my control. I have no control over it. So like whatever rules we're under next year, I'm ready for them, and we're going to go out and win as many games as we can.
And speaking of burning bullpens, are you for or against position players pitching? And do you give them any tips or anything when they go out there or anything like that, or you just say just go out there and just throw the ball over the plate?
I am for position players pitching, especially if they can pitch. No, like I enjoy watching the guys that can go both ways. Hopefully, there's more of that coming. I think that's great for the game. From a fan's view, that's got to be super cool. Yeah, and I actually try to tell them to throw slow. So most guys will try to get up there and they'll try to throw it as hard as they can, and they end up in that 82 to 86 mile an hour range, which is like batting practice. But if they stay under 80 or in that 70 to 75 range, that's where you get guys, they'll start topping it or they'll pop it up and it'll just get off the barrel. So, yeah, throw slower. Don't throw harder.
Well, I top out at 65 miles an hour, so I guess if you guys are
You'd
in a
be
pinch,
perfect.
there you go. I'll come in the
You'd be perfect.
exactly. So we had a lot of Mets mailbag questions, actually. I know that you can't talk specifically about players due to some of the circumstances, but we have a couple there. Josh asks, well, you're going to be getting Max Scherzer on the team. Is it going to be strange coaching someone older than you? I guess you can answer that because just talking about coaching people that are older than you in general.
Yeah, so we had guys that were older than me over the last couple of years, and then even going back to my time in Minnesota. It's really not strange because we both want the same things. The player wants to do really well. The player wants to win, and that's what I want to do too. I want to be a part of a group that is growing and learning and challenging and has some accountability. And when you have more experienced, when you have some experience on you and you're an experienced player, you can really bring a lot to that type of environment and culture.
All right. Michael asks, do teams overuse their bullpens in general? And what about the Mets?
Yeah, it's tough to answer that question for the whole league because I don't know each individual guy and what they're actually capable of, how they feel on a given day. I don't know. Like, I would say that I would say generally teams are not overusing their bullpen. They may overuse particular players in their bullpen, but in terms of like the 7 to 9 guys that are in the bullpen, I would say they're not overusing them.
All right. Peter asks, what techniques do you use with your pitchers to keep them calm and relaxed?
Ooh, that's a great question, Peter. I think that's that's kind of the new thing is breathing and meditation and seeing things before you do them, visualizing. I think that's how I keep calm. Having a plan, being process oriented, making things internal, like the conflict, not the conflict, but the competitiveness is against myself. Like I'm trying to be better than I was yesterday, as opposed to letting the external dictate my competitiveness, where like I may execute a pitch down and away to the other team's best hitter, and he may still hit it for a home run, but like I did my job. I was better today than I was yesterday. And so I think if guys can, obviously, like it's tough when you lose a game, and it's easy to say like I'm only concerned with the process. I'm not concerned with the results. But like we're a results based game. But the more we can be process oriented, the results the results tend to be better. And so keeping guys in that lane, in the process lane, tends to keep guys calmer because they understand what they need to do. They understand what their strengths are. They understand the plan. Now they just got to go execute. And part of that, part of execution, part of process is sometimes it doesn't work. And the other team, the other guys on the other side of the field, they get paid too. And
Right.
They have a process and they have a plan that they're trying to execute. And so, that's, if we can just stay in that lane, in that process lane more, then we won't ride the roller coaster of the results lane.
I will do one or two more questions. Benji asks, do you promote pitchers on the staff helping out other pitchers?
Oh, yes, Benji. Absolutely. That is, yeah. I hope, and this is kind of crazy for a pitching coach to say, but like I want to coach myself out of a job. Like I want to make my players so good and so autonomous, like they can just take care of themselves, right? Like that should be every pitching coach's goal. Is if they're, because I'm not the one out there throwing the baseball, like they are, and so they need to know what adjustments need to make if a particular pitch isn't working that well. And most of the time, I'd say maybe not most. 70% of the time, 60 to 7% of the time, a lot of the things that you learn from your peers. And the coaches are more like guardrails or bumpers. And like if some of the the talk starts to get completely out of whack, then we bring everybody back to center. But yeah, that's how we learn and grow, is we talk. And how do you hold your changeup? Oh, how do you hold your slider? I do this with my index finger. My intent is here. I try to throw that pitch middle inside and let it break off the plate. Like all those types of things are happening all the time.
I actually have one final question. Which manager or coach has affected you or impacted you most in your career? Well, who do you think? Who do you say?
Who? Did you say coach or player?
Coach, player, manager, who
Okay.
gave you the most either guidance or affected you the most throughout your career?
So many. Man. I go on and on. I have so many people that I wouldn't be in this position. Obviously, like I'm a young man in a, being a pitching coach in the major leagues. That doesn't happen by accident. Like there's been a lot of people that have come alongside me. I'd say like going back to my major league days, like being around Johan Santana, his competitiveness, talking about pitching to your strengths. Like he could throw his changeup whenever he wanted, and so we're going to hit it. I think about Chris Young. Yeah, who's now the GM for the Rangers. And I learned process, and I learned breaking down a hitter. He was not a velocity guy; he was a command guy, and so he had to navigate a lineup a particular way. And I learned a lot from him. And I think about maybe guys that are a little bit under the radar, like Dylan G, who we were similar in a lot of ways, but we both had to overcome injuries, and then like guys like Matt Harvey and other guys that were kind of coming up during that time. You learn what it's like to throw hard and how their bodies were working. And going back to the previous question about talking to your teammates, like, that's kind of where, I started to learn, some biomechanics stuff, trying to understand, like, I was only throwing 91, 92. Why can't I throw 98, 99? And trying to understand the differences between myself and someone else. Is it just genetics? Is it something I can be doing in the weight room? Like you start going down these different avenues, even as a player, and like not even knowing what the future would hold, 9 years later. Now I'm a pitching coach, like trying to help guys throw harder. So, it's, I'm very grateful for all the people that have kind of been in my life.
No, that sounds great. You mentioned Chris Young, who defeated the Mets in the 2015 World Series. We remember that one.
Mm-hmm. Sorry to bring that up, guys.
No, all good. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really appreciate you being on this show. And what's in store for you in the coming weeks to get ready for 2022?
Yeah, just spend time with my family. With the holidays, and then we'll see kind of what happens with the lockout situation, and still planning for spring training, and that whole thing takes some time to kind of iron out, and then I'm sure we'll be getting staff members, manager and otherwise, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of Zooms and talking on the phone and just preparing for the season like we always do. But now's family time. Try to spend as much time with my kids and my wife as possible, and before the season fires up.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, wishing you a happy holidays and happy New Year. And we'll be back on the Beat the Shift podcast next week with a couple of episodes. You won't want to miss that. Once again, thank you so much, Jeremy Hefner, the pitching coach of the New York Mets, for joining us on the show. I'm Ariel Cohen alongside Ruvain Guy, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.